Hey there, traveler. Welcome to the Kling Connection. Whether you're chasing adventure, inspiration, or just need a break from the ordinary, this is your place to reconnect, recharge, and rediscover the joy of the journey.
From sunrise hikes to unexpected roadside gems, we're taking you along for the ride, exploring places, meeting people, and making memories that stick.
Let's go explore, where purpose meets the path, and let's make every mile meaningful.
Where every road leads to a new story and every destination brings a fresh perspective.
Welcome to the Kling Connection, fam.
Are you tired of business coaches who promise the moon but deliver, well, nothing? Then it's time to meet Sean Kling. He's not here to tell you what you want to hear. He's here to tell you what you need to hear. With decades of real-world experience under his belt, Sean cuts through the noise and delivers sharp-witted insights that get results. He's built for leaders who are serious about scaling and dominating their industry. Stop settling for sugar-coated advice. It's time for the straight truth that fuels success. Work with Sean Kling. Visit SeanKling.com to book your power call, coaching session, or explore partnership opportunities today. Outwork them all. Outthink, outsmart, outlast.
Welcome to the Kling Connection Travel Talk Podcast, where the world of travel comes to life through real conversations. Hosted by Sean Kling, each episode explores the highs and lows of life on the road, connecting with travelers, industry insiders, and digital nomads to uncover expert tips, budget hacks, and inspiring stories. Whether you're a weekend explorer, a full-time adventurer, or simply Wanderlust curious, Sean brings first-hand advice, destination insights, and honest takes from those shaping the global travel scene. Join Sean Kling.
Hey, fellow travelers, it's Sean with the Kling Connection. Welcome to another great episode. And today we have an amazing guest, a world traveler, and a fellow history enthusiast just like me. You guys know that I love history. I love to talk history. I love just being at historical sites. And we have a lady here today with us that specializes in UNESCO World Sites, as well as just traveling the world and checking out history locations. And we'd like to welcome Abigail Vacca to our show today. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and tell us a little bit about your history and where your love of history comes from.
Sure. So I am in Connecticut, and I have always been a big history buff. Partially, I think, because my father has a master's degree in American history. And so I grew up hearing all about Alexander Hamilton and just really unconventional things at the dinner table. And when I say unconventional, I mean, I think most families either didn't talk much during dinner or they were just watching the daily news. But my dad kind of used it as an opportunity to school me in historic preservation, because he actually was also a historic preservationist for the city of Newark, New Jersey as well.
Oh, wow. That's kind of cool. It is cool. As I can kind of relate a little bit. My father was a Marine in Vietnam, and he used to tell me stories about when he was in the Marine Corps. And I grew up on stories of my father, my grandfather in the Second World War, who was also a Marine, and my mom's father was big into Native American history. He was really big into that, and they weren't so much preservationists, but they were amateur historians, and they loved it. And their history love wore off on me. And you being in New England, I mean, that's like the hotbed center of American history, early American history, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, all these areas up there. And, your father with a love of history, I mean, you must have seen a lot of cool places and still see a lot of cool places up in the New England area as far as history goes.
Yeah, I feel really lucky that I can kind of travel along the 13 original colony states, if you will, easily. And there is so much to see. I mean, from Maine to Gettysburg up in your area, it is just a treasure trove of learning. And it's funny, I was just talking to a friend the other day, despite being in a close proximity, I've never been to Plymouth Rock. So
Wow.
Even though it's not a UNESCO site, I feel like I need to try to get there in the next year.
Wow. So if any of our fans are listening, where can they check you out online to see some of the places that you've been?
Sure. There are a bunch of different platforms. So they can find me, of course, on Facebook or TikTok, Global Treasures Podcast. I try to update as much as possible with the latest information about new UNESCO sites being added, as well as just updates related even to visiting the countries that have UNESCO sites. And then you can learn about when new episodes are going to be released on globaltreasurestravel.com. And then, of course, on all of the platforms that have podcasts. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, iHeartMedia, you name it.
And we want all of our fans to go and listen to some of her shows. I was listening to one of her shows, and I'm going to get into that in a second, but I was listening to one of her shows right before we got online, and I was talking to her a little about it, and I said, Abigail, I mean, you really got something going here. You something very, very unique, and what you have is very special to somebody like me, but it's special to educating the American people, and I want to thank you for getting that education out there and learning it from your dad and passing it on to everybody else.
I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
So now we're at the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. My really good friend is one of these guys that does the reenacting stuff, and he was up at Battle Road in Massachusetts just back in April, and he did the reenactment of Battle Road up there, and they were very strict and stuff. Have you visited Battle Road? Have you ever been there?
I have not, no, but I am very excited about the 250th anniversary as well, because I also happen to be a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution. So we're going to be planning a lot of activities around it as well.
You're a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution. That's kind of cool. My cousin told me that we're actually eligible I'm eligible to be, I guess it would be the Sons of the American Revolution. Apparently we had an ancestor that was in the Philadelphia Navy or the Pennsylvania Navy during the American Revolution that was in the Philadelphia campaign on my mom's father's side. Didn't even know the states had their own Navy force back then, but apparently they did.
It's amazing when you can trace all of the ancestry back. It's a lot of fun. I recommend anyone who hasn't done that, if they can, do like 23andMe or Ancestry.com.
So now I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the episodes that's near and dear to my heart. And you actually enlightened me to something very interesting. Being a Pennsylvania native, we're one of the 13 colonies and the home of the United States capital at one point. I know the first capital, I believe, was in York, Pennsylvania, and then it was in Philadelphia and then New York and then Washington, D.C. But you were telling me that Gettysburg Battlefield is not a UNESCO site, and you're very surprised it isn't?
I am. I know there are so many amazing places in the United States. We actually only have, I believe, 26 UNESCO World Heritage sites. And when I first found that out, I was pretty surprised. But then I kind of took a step back and I thought about it. And I was like, we're a much younger country, like you said, 250 years compared to thousands and thousands plus years history in like different European countries. So I guess that makes sense. But for me, there are sites like Gettysburg. I think probably my biggest soapbox would actually be Joshua Tree National Park is not a a UNESCO site.
Wow.
There are so many beautiful spots in this country, or just places with such intense history that it surprises me.
Well, and then, like I said, I'm from Pennsylvania, but one place in Pennsylvania that we talked about prior to the show is in Philadelphia, is Independence Hall. That's interesting that Gettysburg, Independence Hall is, obviously the founding of the United States. Gettysburg is not. It's probably the biggest battle in American history fought on American soil, but Independence Hall, is. And, let's talk a little bit about Independence Hall. Like, tell me what makes it the UNESCO World Site, and also, what your draw was to it. You did an episode on it.
I did, yes. So maybe I'll take a step back and explain what UNESCO sites are for anyone who don't know or don't even know what UNESCO is. So UNESCO stands for the United Nations Scientific, Educational, and Cultural Organization. That's a mouthful. And so these are sites that are designated by the United Nations. So they're places like Independence Hall, Yellowstone National Park, the Grand Canyon, the Galapagos Islands. So really unique, one-of-a-kind sites across the world that they believe deserve to be recognized for their cultural value to humanity, if you will. So the sites are nominated by the host country. So like, for example, one year, the United States said, we want to nominate Independence Hall. And these sites can be anything from ancient ruins, historical structures, cities, deserts, forests, islands, lakes, mountains, national parks. I could keep going. And I should also just note, it's interesting that these sites can be delisted, but that's incredibly rare. So I think that's only happened a few times in history. But going back to Independence Hall, I explain that because I think sometimes people visit these sites, and Independence Hall is a great example, where they're like, it's just a building. It doesn't feel important per se when you're just looking at it, but it's the historical contextual perspective, knowing that, our Declaration of Independence was signed in that building. They were deliberating for days over it. So it was really the foundation for our country.
Yeah, it's kind of like, growing up in the Philadelphia area, it's sacred ground. We went to school trips to Independence Hall. We went to see the Liberty Bell, Betsy Ross's house. All that stuff was down there. And Old City, Philadelphia has a unique charm to it. Now, the city of Philadelphia itself, we can go back and forth about that, but the actual Old City has a very unique charm that very few areas in the United States have. Maybe you might be able to say Boston. There's parts of Boston that have that, and as far as as I'm concerned, it's up for debate, but Boston would probably be one, and maybe something like Colonial Williamsburg, would be pretty close. But there's just something interesting about Independence Hall in Philadelphia. And what made you choose that episode?
So for the podcast, I just go in order of the year that UNESCO designated these sites. So I cover a new location each episode, and the first group of 12 sites were established in 1978, and now there's over 1,223 of the sites. Although this is interesting timing, they just released the list of new UNESCO World Heritage sites for 2025, and I haven't even gotten the chance to look at them. Usually the list doesn't come out until, I would say, August or September. So Independence Hall was in the second list for 1979. So that's why I covered it. But I just got there for the first time, I'm embarrassed to say, a couple weeks ago. So I got to go there and the Liberty Bell. And I tried to go to Reading Market, but we couldn't get parking, unfortunately. So I just...
The parking's terrible there.
Yes.
But they have great pulled pork sandwiches at the Nick's in the Reading Terminal Market.
Oh, that sounds so good.
But, with your father being a historian and you yourself being a historian, really, if you had to name the four, I like to put people on the spot with this question. All of American history, the four most influential people that you personally find as the four most influential people in American history, who would that be?
Wow, that is definitely a question that is very personal, huh? For me, I am going to say number one is Teddy Roosevelt, because I am a huge fan of the national park system, and he established it. And I would say at least half of the UNESCO World Heritage sites in the United States are probably national parks. So again, like Yellowstone, Mesa Verde, Redwood. Number two, I would probably say George Washington. He was our first president. He really set the stage for us not becoming England Part 2 and going back to a monarchy. It's funny, I think of my nephews, I hear them in my head, they'd be like, say Alexander Hamilton. I mean, the Postal Service is really impactful. Think about how that really touches our lives in such a positive way every single day, right? Like we get mail partially because of him, and him really just seeing the future. And then, number four, I would probably say Martin Luther King Jr. And first of all, the civil rights movement was huge in this country. It's something that we all learn about in school for a good reason. And I have a more personal connection. So the town that I grew up in is very proud of this. There are tobacco barns in the center of town, and I don't think that they're considered a historic site, but if they're not, they really should be. And Martin Luther King Jr. worked at these tobacco fields as a kid, well, teenager, I should say. And it's been said that he was treated so well. He would come down here during the summers to work, and he was able to eat at the same restaurants as everyone else, apparently. And he was so moved that it proved to him that big, drastic, violent measures did not have to be taken for us to come together as a country and find peace and harmony. And I just think that's so beautiful.
It is. And I love how you look at things through a historical lens. In today's world, people look at things from one side or another. And I love and I really appreciate how you look at the people that you had suggested. Is they're humans, just like we are. They're humans, and they're flawed characters like everybody else. But the four people you think that would probably be my four people. The only other person I probably would have put in there that I really think would have probably, in my personal belief, would have been Ulysses S. Grant. I mean, that's a really rags to riches story. A man that was selling firewood on the side of the road, and 5 years later, he is commanding general of the U.S. Army, and 8 years later, he is president of the United States. And he did a lot for civil rights. He was surrounded by corruption, but let's face it, in a lot of ways, as a military historian myself, you look at certain people in military history, George Washington obviously being number one, but to me, number two is always Ulysses S. Grant when it comes to that. But that's just me.
Excellent choice.
So you don't only just talk about these podcasts, and these locations, you go to these locations. So you travel around the world and you check out these historical sites and all that. Tell me a little bit about this. This is interesting because not everybody's going to have a chance to go to all these historical sites. And what's the furthest one you've ever been to, and some of the cool experiences you've had?
So I think I'll start by answering that by kind of taking a step back and explaining how I got my start, because I think it was more unconventional and definitely not planned. So I was inspired to start traveling and create the podcast and kind of, again, share my love of traveling, because during my childhood, I created a bucket list and I sort of forgot about it. And then I found it many years later when I was stress cleaning during the COVID-19 pandemic, as many of us did. And I was laughing about it with my past co-host because, some of the items were silly, but one of them caught my eye. And it was that I had wanted to visit every UNESCO World Heritage site in the world. I was huge into National Geographic magazine as a kid, probably no surprise. And, being 8 or 9 years old, I didn't understand that there are over 1,000 of these sites worldwide, and that would be really hard to do. And I shared the list again with my co-host at the time, and in doing research, we realized no one was covering these sites. No one was creating podcasts about them, and that was a major gap in the market. Or if I found a podcast that did talk about one of these sites, it wasn't purely the history or travel tips I was looking to learn. The hosts were interjecting like their own political opinion into the mix, or it wasn't necessarily clean in terms of language. And I wanted to create a podcast that was neutral and could be enjoyed by adults in front of their children, with universal appeal, if you will. So a podcast that would get them excited to plan trips together. And dually, I said to myself, well, if I'm talking about these sites, I don't want to put my foot in my mouth. I need to be visiting them too, as many as I can. And I really just wanted to fulfill that childhood mission and dream. And so I started with, I think the first one I ever visited was Vatican City, which is magical. If you get to Rome, you have to go to Vatican City.
I was just there. I just was there this week. Vatican City, the Colosseum, all of that, yeah.
Yes, the Colosseum is amazing. I think I was so enchanted by Vatican City because, I did grow up Roman Catholic, so it was exciting for me in that regard. But I think it's one of the cleanest places I've ever been, unless something's changed since I must have been there like 4 or 5 years ago, because, Rome is a typical city, right? It can be kind of dirty. And then you walk into the Vatican and it's like white and clean and pristine everywhere with like the flowing fountains. And it was one of the first things I did. When I arrived, we went there at night and it was just gorgeous. But then I would say my other favorites, I would recommend if you can only get to a couple UNESCO World Heritage sites in your lifetime. Stonehenge is so unique. I know some people will write to me like on Facebook and say, well, it's just a bunch of rocks. And I'm like, well, no, but it's more than that. It's the history. It's the magic of not truly knowing why it exists. We only have ideas, are just grasping at straws. And I just think that makes a site extra interesting. And then, the number one I always wanted to visit that I'm so grateful I got the opportunity was the Alhambra in Granada, Spain. I don't know if you've gotten there. Granada might just be one of my favorite places in the world, full stop. I love the people, the food, weather, culture. If I ever win $1 million, I am getting an apartment there. But again, the site itself is just gorgeous. So you can see why royals would have wanted to reside there. So it's like at the top of a hill. it's an extensive walk, but totally worth it. Like the flowers are blooming. Again, the fountains flowing. Truly, it is like something out of a postcard. And if you're like me and you like cats, there are like stray cats roaming everywhere. There's nothing like it.
Oh, my daughter would don't tell my daughter that. She'll be she loves cats. She's had the same cat since she was a little girl. Since her best friend. So if she's listening to this, no, that's not why we go there. So when you go to these locations, how do you like map out your trip? How do you decide which one you want to go to? And are you able to visit like multiple ones because of the proximity of, maybe let's say you're going to go to some part of Europe and you see that there's so many within so many hours of a trip from where you're staying or where you land. How do you set these up, and how do you decide where you want to go?
Yes, so there are so many ways I could answer that. So yes, off the bat, I will look at the map of a country, and I literally sometimes will type into Google UNESCO World Heritage sites just to reacclimate myself where they're all located. Because one of the reasons that some of these sites has remained so well preserved is because they are literally in the middle of nowhere and very hard to get to. That does not deter me, though. I will find a bus or however I have to get there. So one example is Andorra. So that is a landlocked country between France and Spain. They have no airport in the country because it's so mountainous. I guess it's too treacherous for them to build one. So I literally took, I think it was a 3.5-hour bus ride each way. And I stayed a couple nights, and I'm so glad I did. It's a really beautiful country. But they only have one UNESCO site, so I made sure I was able to see it. But it really depends on the country. So one of the things I've also become passionate about talking about is I'm big into traveling for food. I love food. I love experiencing new cultures through that lens. But I actually travel with food allergies and have some health issues. So I sometimes will have to take that into account when I'm booking a trip. I used to weigh it more heavily. However, I've gotten to the point where I'm like, that's not even going to stop me. I'll bring protein bars. And, I've been so pleasantly surprised with how accommodating other countries are to food allergies. Sometimes better than when I'm traveling in the United States, and there isn't even a language barrier there. And then, of course, being realistic, sometimes price can heavily factor in. Being in Connecticut, we don't have the largest airport, so I'm lucky that I sit between Boston and JFK, and actually I could even easily get to the Newark International Airport. But if I were to fly straight out of Bradley, it can be pricey, or there's a lot of layovers. So as a result, I haven't yet gotten to any UNESCO sites in Asia, but that's definitely on my to-do list.
Yeah, it's we're planning some trips to Asia as well. I was telling you earlier, my father was in the Marines in Vietnam, and I'd love to go to Vietnam to check it out. My father won't go with me. I've tried to get him to go. I've asked him multiple times. He won't go. And I respect that. Sometimes you just don't go back to where bad things happen. But Asia is definitely on the list for us. We work with people all over the world, and we interview people that are not just in the United States on this show. And we've been invited to go to Australia. We've been invited to go to the Philippines, Guam, all sorts of places. So Asia is definitely on the list. Now, if you were going to Asia and you had to pick, like, what UNESCO site, give me a couple sites. Like, which ones would you want to see if you only had to choose a handful of them? Which ones really are like, Abigail, come see me?
Well, I have to say, just in general, Japan is one of the two countries that I'm like, if I don't get there before I die, I will be so upset. I always say Japan and Norway. I mean, of course, Great Wall of China. I can't even, and I'm a really tiny person, like I'm 5'1", barely 100 pounds. And so I'm like, I just want to stand on that massive wall and like stare into the wilderness. That's got to be breathtaking. Have you been there?
I've never been to China, but the wall does look, and the wall looks amazing, and the history behind it is, you know, again, that would be my draw to go see it, would be the history behind it. And there's so much stories in these unique sites that make it, I don't know, I'm a little bit weird when it comes to history stuff. I can almost visually go and stand there and visually see things in my mind as they would have happened. And I mean, we talked about Gettysburg earlier. I mean, I can literally stand in, you know, where you know, Lee did his charge on the third day and visualize that type of stuff in my mind. So that would be cool, but I've never been to China.
And then there's also one other site that I will just like go and stare at pictures of it. And I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Ellora Caves. And that's a UNESCO site in India. I believe it's one of the, if not the largest rock cut cave complexes in the world. Like it's full of just artwork from like 600 AD. Like, so it represents Hindu and Buddhism and just a wide plethora of different types of spiritual beliefs. And I just think that's really special.
So when you go on these trips, how do you know what to pack? How do you know what to bring with you? And, you know, your gear. I mean, are you camping out? Are you staying in a hotel? Are you, you know, that, you know, a lot of these places you said are really rural. So I imagine sometimes there's not lodging, or, you know, that'd be kind of interesting. Like, how do you prepare them? What do you do?
I've never camped. Well, I have camped in the United States. I've never camped near any of the UNESCO sites. I am definitely not opposed to it, though. So if I ever go to like Sagarmatha National Park, which is where Everest is, you don't really have an option. They have, I think, one lodge, but otherwise people are camping because you have to walk a couple days to even get to the park. But in terms of packing, I tend to overpack just because you never know. Like there are certain countries where you need to bring antibiotics with you. You need to make sure that you have multiple copies of like your passport, for example. And those sound like, oh, they're small things, but they add up quickly. And so I try to travel with just one checked bag at most. I don't think I've ever had more than that, other than a trip that was a couple weeks long. I prefer Airbnbs or just homestay options to hotels because I'll have access to a kitchen, have access to washer dryer. So that allows me to bring far less. Plus, I mean, realistically, I end up buying clothing and souvenirs on the way. So I try to always keep that in mind as well.
So when you go to these places, are you going by yourself? Do you have a team of people you go with? Do you go with friends, a partner, a business partner?
A mixture. I am definitely open to traveling solo. I've done it before. I love it. You meet people along the way, especially when people realize that you're by yourself. I feel like they're more likely to, you know, hey, come sit with us at dinner or what have you. And that's the best way to make friends organically. I have gone with my partners. I've gone with my family, like the trip I just took to Independence Hall. I was going to take it solo. And then my family was like, well, that sounds fun. Can we come too? And I said, sure. So we ended up going to Independence Hall. And then actually we hit another UNESCO site too, Monticello, which was another one I had never been to.
Monticello. Okay. Yep. I've been to Monticello. it's interesting, when we think history in the United States, we don't think of UNESCO. Well, first of all, a lot of people don't know what UNESCO is, but I'm learning something very new today being with you. I didn't know that Monticello was a part of that system. That's interesting.
Yeah, it is for the historical, but mostly architectural. I think it's the only, what's the term, Georgian building in Virginia. I'd have to double check that though.
So you go into these locations and you're checking them out. You're hiking these mountains and these roads and all this stuff and, having a blast. Is there anything crazy that's ever happened at any of these locations? Like you ever see a ghost or you ever meet some strange people or, everybody's got some crazy travel stories. Like, what's your story? Like what have you run into?
I've run into a host of different issues over the years. No ghosts. I used to talk more heavily about the paranormal and true crime pieces on earlier episodes of my podcast, but I found it drew an interesting group of humans to listening, which I'm not opposed to. Who knows? Maybe ghosts are real. But I haven't talked about it as much. I don't want to deter anyone. I would share this story just from the perspective of have fun on your trips. Loosen up, be flexible, but don't let your guard down. So I was almost assaulted at an open air market in Barcelona, Spain. Wow. And then another time, first day I arrived when I went to Italy. It was actually the Vatican trip I was telling you about. Someone tried to pickpocket us. Thankfully, I had my guard up because, that's a thing. You just have to be mindful. Make sure that you have hidden pockets or you wear one of those pouches with your money in it inside your shirt. Whatever works for you. Belly bags. So just, I've seen the best and worst in humanity for sure. Like on the other end, I've had people show me tremendous grace when I'm stressed out because a flight has been canceled. That's always the worst.
I know a little off subject, but boy, the airlines anymore is, when we flew to Rome, we just flew actually this week. We left out of the airport and we got to go and they changed our flight 4 times and they canceled our flight. So they had us book a new flight with a connecting flight in Atlanta. Then by the time we got to JFK, we got our plane to Italy and that was delayed. Then when we landed in Italy, we were fine. But then on the way back, we sat on the tarmac for an hour and a half and then got to JFK to catch our connecting flight. And we sat there for 6 hours. They kept on bumping stuff up and everything was delayed. So the anxiety of travel is definitely there. I don't think, anybody that does any amount of traveling, I don't care if you're a traveler for business every day of the week, there's always that anxiety. Am I going to get that connecting flight? Is that going to happen? And that's something that absolutely drives me insane. That's not really the topic of the show today, but I have some of the biggest pet peeves when it comes to flying at airports. I mean, it just don't even get me started.
I hear that. It's interesting because I get asked that question a lot. Like, do you think that 2 hours is enough time to get in and out of the airport or like through security anyway? And I'm like, it depends on the airport and it depends if you have TSA pre-check or global entry. I think those are priceless.
Oh yeah, we have pre-TSA and was it just announced this weekend that they're no longer making you take your shoes off at the TSA now, the regular TSA?
Mm-hmm.
Thank God, because that was gross.
And I'd always inevitably forget to wear socks.
Yeah. So when you go to these sites and you're spending time there, like, are you videoing this stuff? Are you taking pictures or, do you put like a montage together of your trip, or how do you handle that? Because I'm always out with my phone every 2 seconds, like everybody else, taking every picture. But we also have lots of camera equipment, and outside of the podcast we do here, we actually have a travel show where we shoot video. Do you kind of do that?
I saw the show. It's excellent.
Thank you.
So I am trying to be better about that. I am really trying hard to balance being in the moment and also recording it for, again, the podcast or social media clips. I'm better about taking photos for sure, and that's more for personal reasons, but I have made it my mission this year to start posting once or twice a week at least.
So are you going anywhere this year? And if you are, where do you have any plans on going?
So I'm actually in the process of planning my next trip. I am either going to do, I'm in between. So my goal this year was to go to as many UNESCO sites in the United States as possible. And I'm really torn between going to the Everglades. I've been to Florida a million times and I've never been there. Always say I'll go and then I don't. Or going to some of the national parks out west. So if you have suggestions, you might sway me.
Well, it's funny, if you check out one of the episodes of our show, we did the most crazy thing at the beginning of this year. We had a house and we sold our house in Florida, sold it flat out, sold it to an older guy. We loaded up the car, and when he bought the house, he bought the furniture and everything. And we drove across the country from Florida to California and back without having a place to live. We stayed in Airbnb, which is totally not like our thing. We stayed at Airbnb, and then we came back to Florida, and we seen so many cool places on the way. Absolutely love Sedona. Sedona, if you've never been to Sedona, Red Rocks, all that, it is some of the most beautiful country you will ever see. There's history there. There's hiking there. There's good food. It's very small. Like the town itself of Sedona is very small. I would highly recommend Sedona. The history geek in me went to Fort Worth. I love when I went to college, I did my historiography on the post-Civil War, pre-World War I U.S. military. And in Fort Worth was, a lot of that time period. So Fort Worth at the stockyards, if you've never been there, great, cool place to check out. It's, looks like it's around the turn of the century, 1890s, 1900. I could sit and suggest places all day long, but driving across the country definitely opened my eyes up to just how big the United States are and how diverse of a people we are. People in New Mexico have nothing in common with people who live in Nevada. People in Nevada have nothing in common to live with people in Alabama, except we're all Americans. And there's so much cool stuff out there to see in the United States.
For sure. And that's actually advice I always give people that I've never actually taken myself. If you can rent an RV, if you're up to driving an RV, you should totally drive across the United States and just hit all of these random spots. Or, of course, I'm going to say UNESCO sites, but there's so much more than that.
Oh, yeah. It was fun. We took a regular car and drove across the country. So Shana got to sleep in the back. I did most of the driving, which is fine because I would go nuts just sitting in the car. But there were days that we were getting in the desert and we were just like, oh, this ride is taking forever. And other times we couldn't spend enough time. And we got to so many cool places that, obviously a lot of them probably weren't UNESCO sites, but we went to some presidential libraries. We checked out some beaches. It's really worth it. And we saw a lot of these people with these camper vans, these vans that they had converted into sleeping vans and stuff. And we said, man, maybe one day we'll do that.
There's something to that, right? Like you create those once in a lifetime memories by going off course. If you plan out every single thing you're going to do by the minute, I have dated people who literally had an itinerary that planned things out, like 7 a.m. breakfast, 7:25, we're going to get on the train. I'm not exaggerating. For some destinations, that makes sense. Like if you're going to Disney World, I guess you need to do that. But if you have open days just to explore, I hope people don't feel like that's wasted. That's the point of vacation. And I think that we have such a hustle culture that we feel like any minute not filled with activities or museum visits, what have you, that we forget that just looking out the window, people watching, sipping a cappuccino can be just as memorable.
Yeah, I was, we went to London last year. It was our one show that really took off the channel when we went to London. And I went to London with, in my mind, like most Americans that had never been there, I imagine this burned out town that's left over from the Second World War. And, everybody walking around as a chimney sweep and Oliver Twist is, you think that, that's, and you get there and it's a modern city with old stuff. And, everybody complains today about London, about this is bad, that bad. But, the people in London were so nice. We didn't run into one bad person. They were so helpful. And it didn't matter, if they were from the country, if they weren't from the country originally, they were all great people. But the one thing that I really enjoyed about London, and I'd love to go back, is the pub culture. And I don't even drink. I don't drink at all. But these guys are out watching soccer games. And again, I'm not a soccer guy, but they're out watching soccer games and are hanging out with their friends. And we don't really have anything like that in the United States. And it's really cool.
I agree. I always say to people, you can use sites like TripAdvisor to read reviews and try to curate a trip, but don't just use other people's opinions as a way of building an itinerary. Those moments, like you said, that's you're watching people build community in their countries. And I just think that's so interesting. And that's such a simple way that we can learn from each other.
Yeah. So if you ever had to move abroad, you ever said, you know what, I'm tired of Connecticut. I don't want to live here anymore. And obviously we talked about Granada, but where would you think about putting stakes in the ground?
A places I've visited or a place I think I would love?
Either or both.
I loved Andorra too. It's just, even being in the bigger cities, it's a quieter way of life. And I mean, I live in the suburbs, so it's not like we're party central, but everyone just seemed happy and content. And I think that's what I aim for. That's why I like traveling. I'm always happy when I'm seeing a new place through someone else's eyes. So maybe Andorra, or again, Granada. The people were just so lovely. It's exactly what you were describing in London. It was nothing like what people told me it would be. And on a side note, people are totally wrong about the food in London being awful. I was told that, and it was not sausages. I was having some of the best pizza of my life. Cake. I mean, I was trying to remember the name of the large market. We were there every day, basically, and we would eat something different. So you just have to find what works for you.
Yeah, it's not all bubble and squeak or whatever. A pig toad in a blanket. It's not all that stuff. But the one thing that I've noticed with traveling, and I'm sure just talking to you, you've probably noticed it too, is if you watch television, and it doesn't matter what country you're in, it really doesn't. You're taught to think bad about people in other countries and watch. You can't trust them, or something's going to happen to you. And everywhere we've gone, I have maybe run into maybe one or two jerks. And everybody else has been great. And even those people that were kind of not nice, it might have been a communication thing. It might have been a language barrier. It might have been just a cultural thing. But, you find that when you go to these places, you meet some of the nicest people, and they're really no different in the way that they treat you than somebody else. Matter of fact, in a lot of ways, the way Americans treat some people, and again, this is not political. It's just Americans treat people versus, you go to some of these other countries, they treat you like family. They really do. And they're really, really nice. That's
one of the things that motivates me. I totally agree. I always say if we stop being so busy picking each other apart, traveling shows you that our food, our cultures, our ways of seeing the world, yes, they're different, but they're actually more similar than you'd think. And I think we'd all be better global citizens and so much kinder to each other if we just explored the world.
Yeah. I totally agree. I mean, have you ever been to New Zealand or Australia?
Not yet, no, but definitely on my list.
I am a huge Lord of the Rings guy. I know, like every guy my age, love Lord of the Rings. So one of our next adventures is to go to New Zealand and check it out. First of all, the landscape is, Shane and I both love beautiful landscape, and it's probably some of the best in the world. The other thing is the film sets. Again, guilty as charged, but I love. I'm looking forward to that. And then also Australia. You have to be careful, though. They said there's a lot of things that want to kill you in Australia.
All the spiders and snakes. That's funny. That makes me think of, I'm a diehard Band of Brothers fan, which probably doesn't surprise you. And there is actually a tour in France that takes you to all of the sites where they either filmed or they were just locations for different episodes. I've always said that the first time I go to France, I think I need to do that.
What a little interesting side note for you, and I've I talk a lot about my family because I'm very proud of who they are. My grandfather's cousin was, I guess so he would be my cousin too, but it was my grandfather's first cousin, was in a parachute infantry regiment that landed at Normandy, and when he was landed, he was captured by the Germans, and him and like 6 other guys were executed. And there's a little monument in France with his name on the monument, last name Kling, same as mine. And you can see the monument, and he's actually buried in one of the cemeteries over there in France. So if we ever get to that point, I'm going to make the pilgrimage to put a flower on his grave, because my grandparents' generation is all gone now. They're no longer around. So, it's up to us to keep that alive.
That's beautiful. I mean, tragic, but really amazing. That you can trace it back. I always say too, another thing that motivated me kind of on the same note, my grandmother now is at the point where she can't really travel, and that side of the family is from Spain, and it really weighs on me heavily that she can't get there. And so when I'm making episodes of the podcast, I think about older people who may never get to some of these places, who might have more limited income or are homebound. So I feel like if they can't get there physically, at least if they can armchair travel with me, I feel like I'm giving them the opportunity to experience all the things that we were talking about, like language and customs and traditions.
Yeah, you and I are definitely on the same wavelength when it comes to that. I when I was in Italy, I was looking around and said, my grandparents never got here, but I'm here. And, I have to suck it all in for them, really. And so, yeah, we're definitely on the same wavelength. So ultimately, at the end of the day, what's your end goal with your podcast? I mean, do you plan to do anything bigger? Do you plan to do anything more once you run out of UNESCO sites? Is there another topic or another angle you want to take your show at some point?
That's an interesting question, one that I think about a lot. I have played around with the idea for a couple other podcasts, so more to come on that. Somewhat UNESCO related. And then I am starting to work on a blog. I really should have gotten started on that sooner, because I started podcasting partially because I love writing. I almost majored in English in college. So there's that. I've thought about merchandise. I have a lot of business ventures in my head that I need to just figure out how it would play out. I don't like to take any risks that aren't calculated. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, as a history person, we're given the carte blanche to tell the story of the people of the past, but tell it through sometimes an angle. And what I always find interesting about history and doing research, like you said, about maybe writing a book or something like that is, we can't judge the people of the past based off of today's standards. We have to kind of look at what it was like in their time frame. And that goes to even people that died 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Things were different in the 90s than they are today or in the early 2000s. And I always find it interesting when I talk to people such as yourself about, writing a book but that are well read and understand history. And, you can go to a place like Stonehenge and understand things, or go to Independence Hall, or go to, Joshua Tree or wherever. And I always find it interesting that we can tell the stories of the past, but we should try to tell it the way that it happened and without a slant.
I agree with you. I really try, like I said before, never to get political. I have no interest in that. But also, I do extensive research because I want to be as respectful as possible, not just from the historical perspective, but even the smaller pieces like how to pronounce the name of countries or certain words, names of the sites. So I will reach out to cultural centers sometimes and just ask them, hey, can I run some things by you? Because I want to make sure that I am representing their culture in a way that pleases them, because I don't have that lived experience.
All right. So what is the next podcast coming out? What topic is that one?
Oh, the next episode actually will drop on Wednesday, and I believe that is going to be the Thracian tomb of Kazanluk.
Oh, really? What's that? What is that? I've never heard of that. What's it about?
I would guess most people have not. So the Thracian tomb of Kazanluk is really unique. It's a vaulted brickwork beehive tomb, if you will. That's like the artistic term. And it is from the Hellenistic period. So like the end of the 4th century BC. And because it was, I guess, sort of buried, it's really well preserved, and it's a small site, but really beautiful.
Yeah, I see you do so many things on Egypt as well. You've had a bunch of stuff in Egypt. Does Egypt hold a special place in your heart? Or, I mean, I know you do things based on when they were entered into, the organization and such, but, Egypt seems so kind of cool. And it seems like, I can definitely hear it in your voice when you talk things about Egypt.
I just think Egyptology and Egyptian history is really interesting and unique. And honestly, the first 2 years were very Egypt and Ethiopia heavy in terms of, I'm not sure if those countries just happened to nominate a lot of sites and they were chosen those 2 years. Again, they're older countries, like they have a longer history than the United States, for example. And so I guess they just have more sites that are worthy of inclusion at this time.
Yeah, I saw that you did an episode on the Ethiopian churches, and I'm going to go back and listen to that. But the interesting thing is most people don't think about Christianity in Ethiopia. They think they might be Muslim or something of that nature. But the Christian Bible they have a different type of Christian Bible, I believe, and maybe I'm wrong, but I believe they have a different type of Christian Bible, and it's an older Christianity. But it's a Christian nation, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, you're correct about that. So Coptic Christianity is actually widespread in the country. So I'm not sure where the confusion permeated from. But yeah, Ethiopia is a really interesting country. It's not large, but the history is very diverse and rich. I mean, and again, they have a host of sites from national parks to churches, you name it.
Wow. I mean, yeah, but that's the cool thing about your podcast. Like I said, I listened to a couple episodes. I am definitely going to go back and listen to more because I learned so much just listening to, the detail the information you give. I mean, and it's not boring. You have a great voice for podcasting, and you can definitely tell there's a lot of research and time that goes into what you put out, and it's very commendable. There's a lot of people out there that are history hacks. You are not one of them. You are definitely a gifted historian, and you are a gift to the historical community.
Thank you. That's very kind. I appreciate that.
So one more time, if people want to go find where your show is at, listen to an episode of your show, or check out your photos or any other information, can you tell everybody where to go?
Sure thing. So Facebook, TikTok, those are the two prime social media sites, along with our website, globaltreasurestravel.com. And then again, we are platformed on Podbean. So you can find the links to all of the major platforms that work for you: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, iHeartMedia, and more.
Well, Abigail, I want to thank you for being on today's show. You've been an amazing guest. And if you had one set of parting words for the listeners here about history, your love of history, and what people can take away, what would that be?
Again, there's always something to be learned about the world around us. I think whether you consider yourself to be an adventure seeker, you like to relax, you vacation just because you want a week of discovery and exploration away from the office, there isn't a wrong way to travel or view history. I just hope that's what people take away from what I bring to the table. Well,
everybody, if you get a chance, go to subscribe, listen to Abigail's show. You will not be disappointed. The Kling Connection will be subscribing and following on all her adventures and listening to all her. And we would love to have her back in the future as a guest on our show to talk about her next UNESCO sites, and to listen to everything she's got going on. So if you like what you heard, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and click that notification bell. You can find us on YouTube. We're on Odyssey. We're on TikTok. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Facebook and Instagram. We're also on Rumble. And you can also find us on all the same podcast platforms as Abigail and her show. And we'd like to thank you for joining us today, Abigail. And until next time, have fun storming the castle.
That's a wrap on today's episode of the Kling Connection Travel Talks podcast.
Tired of YouTube censorship and algorithm games? Join the Kling Connection on Rumble, where your voice matters and content flows freely. Subscribe to the Kling Connection on Rumble today and experience travel content without the restrictions. Make the switch. Your freedom to explore starts here.